Caye boas are a beautiful dwarf form of locality boa from a small island off the coast of Belize. Growing only up to maximum lengths of 4 to 5 feet, these boas might be the perfect choice for somebody looking for a boa constrictor that doesn't take up a whole lot of space. Today I want to discuss their captive husbandry as well as their natural history, and I'll show you some examples of these fascinating miniature constrictors. If you like this video, please subscribe to the Boas YouTube channel for more videos on all aspects of keeping and breeding boas in captivity. Caye boas originated in the island of Caye, which is a very small island in the Caribbean off the coast of Belize. They were first collected back in 1970 by a group that was led by the herpetologist Ross Allen. And then in 1988 and 1990, there were a couple trips made by Bob Sears to the island to collect some of these rare boas. And much of the captive stock today is descended from the animals collected by Bob Sears. And then lastly, Dr. Scott Boback visited the island in the early 2000s to collect some animals for his studies. And some of these animals have also contributed to current bloodlines of Caye boas. Incidentally, if you're interested in Caye boas and other dwarf island boas, I highly recommend you check out the papers of Dr. Scott Boback, who is the world expert on these miniature boa constrictors. Because the island is so small, the wild population of Caye boas today might be only a handful of individuals. So it's really important that people working with them in captivity keep them pure and protect this locality so it will be available to reptile keepers for generations to come. So the description of the Caye boas, the most obvious thing which I alluded to is their small size. This is an adult male. This guy was born in 2013, so he's about 7 years old. And he's about 4 feet long. You can see they also have a relatively slender body. In the wild, they're highly arboreal, and they live in trees, and the diet consists of a lot of birds in the diet. The other main descriptive characteristics of the Caye boas, you can see they have this beautiful steely gray coloration with darker markings. They have a lot of background markings and speckling. They do change color quite a bit. They get lighter and darker. This guy is kind of in his more dark phase right now. And then they have a lot of striping. So you can see this guy has some partial striping towards his tail. Looking at the face, so the face also has a lot of little speckling and different markings. And then another characteristic of that is they have these very prominent kind of bulging eyes that kind of stick out. They're similar to another boa called the Caye boa, which lives on an island that's pretty close by. The difference is the Caye boas tend to be stockier overall, and they tend to be darker. They have more of a darker black, blocky looking markings. And in a future video, I'll show you some of my Caye boas. This is a 2017 holdback male Caye boa. This guy is about 2.5 years old, and he has a lighter than average coloration. He's also got this beautiful purplish lavender tint to his coloration, and one of the reasons I held him back was just the lighter overall coloration. Unfortunately, he's in shed right now, so he's not quite as bright as he usually is. The Caye boas have this kind of anerythristic appearance to them, although they're not quite a true anerythristic, as some specimens will have a little bit of red, especially around the tail. But nonetheless, they do have this overall steely gray background color with darker saddles and very little red pigment. This is a 2017 holdback female. You can see she's a little bit darker than the holdback male I just showed you. She has more of this speckling She has also this stripe towards her tail, which is pretty similar to the first male that I showed you, although this is not an offspring of that first male. The females on average get a little bit bigger than the males. They can get to be 4.5 to 5 feet in length, whereas the males are about a foot or so shorter than the females, about 3.5 to 4.5 feet. They're fairly straightforward to keep in captivity. As I mentioned, you can keep them in smaller spaces. I've kept and bred them in a tub set up in a rack, both in the Iris CB110 tubs, as well as in the Vision 30 by 40 inch boa tubs for my larger animals. Because they're arboreal in the wild, they appreciate climbing, like branches or a piece of driftwood to climb on. The diet in the wild consists of a lot of birds, and the natural history is fascinating because they can survive for many months with no food at all, and then there'll be seasonal migrations of birds to these small islands, and they can gorge themselves on these birds that come in over the course of a few months, and then the rest of the year they hardly eat anything. So they can go a very long time without eating. So it's really imperative that you don't overfeed these animals. They're just not biologically programmed to be overfed. I would say as babies, up until 2 to 3 years of age, you shouldn't feed them any more than every other week or even every 3 weeks. And then when they reach about 3 years of age, you probably want to back them off to every 3 weeks. And then adults, you might feed every 4 weeks. Just important not to overfeed them. I found the Caye boas to be fairly straightforward to breed in captivity using standard techniques that work for other types of locality boas. One thing to keep in mind is that the babies can be sometimes tricky to get to feed on rodents. You may have to try feeding them lizards or pinkies or fuzzies that are scented with lizards. Or you may have to assist feed them, for example, a mouse tail to get them going. I have found though that my Caye boas have been less of an issue to get feeding than my Hog Island boas. The Caye boas, about 2/3 of them will eat right off the bat on live fuzzy mice. With the Hog Island boas, only about 1/3 of them will eat from the beginning on live fuzzy mice. When you're growing up your Caye boas for breeding, it's important, of course, not to grow them too fast. They typically will take a minimum of 4 years for males and 5 years for females to reach breeding size. One last thing I wanted to say about the Caye boas is there's a number of boas from Europe that are labeled as Caye boas, and they don't look like the Caye boas that we have here in the United States, like this guy. It's not clear whether these are just a different variant of boa from the same island, or they could be from another island named Caye. There's actually several islands in the Caribbean that are known as Caye. Or they might be something else altogether, and they might not be an island boa. They're just masquerading as a Caye boa in order to sell them. In fact, there's even some morphs, such as hypomelanistic and T-positive albinos, that are showing up in these European Caye boas. So if any of you guys have any information about these European Caye boas and know exactly what they are, I'd really appreciate it if you would comment below. So that's the Caye boa. Again, these are a beautiful dwarf boa. Terrahumara, I've said, are my favorite dwarf, but the Caye is a very close second, and you know, one day it might surpass the Terrahumara as my favorite dwarf boa. Please let me know if you have any questions, and you can reach out to me or you can comment below. I hope this video was helpful, and enjoy your boas.